Have you ever sat in a place you worked your whole life to deserve, only to be told you didn't belong there? Imagine being 17, brilliant and proud, boarding a flight to present an invention meant to fight bias, and finding yourself living the very injustice you hoped to end. Ava Carter, a calm and gifted black teen, took her first-class seat with nothing but confidence and a dream until a flight attendant questioned her right to be there, until whispers became suspicion, until the words, "Please come with me," turned her courage into quiet defiance. What would you do if the world demanded proof of your worth every time you stood tall? Would you stay silent to keep the peace or stand firm to keep your dignity, because in that moment, one choice would change everything, grace or anger? And when her father, one of the most powerful CEOs in the country, picked up the phone, the world stopped to listen. Stay with us and feel every second of this true human story. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, because some stories deserve to be heard by everyone. Atlanta, Georgia, 6:12 a.m. The first light of morning crawled gently across the blinds, painting soft gold lines over a desk cluttered with open notebooks, coffee mugs, and a glowing laptop screen. Ava Carter sat in the middle of it all, hoodie on, hair tied in neat braids, eyes focused, her fingers dancing over the keyboard. The hum of her old MacBook filled the room like background music to her thoughts. On her screen, a single sentence blinked at the top of a slide deck. Detecting bias before it becomes harm. She whispered the words under her breath. Then, quietly to herself, maybe this time, they'll listen. Her code was her language. Her project, an AI model designed to detect racial bias in real-time decision-making, was her way of fighting what she couldn't fight physically. Today, she'd fly to Chicago to present it at the Future Tech Scholars Conference. The youngest speaker ever invited, 17 years old, a black girl from Atlanta, and the daughter of one of the most powerful CEOs in the aviation industry, though she hated that last part being mentioned first. From the hallway, a deep, steady voice called out, "You awake, baby girl?" "Been awake, Dad," she replied, smiling faintly. Malcolm Carter leaned against the doorway, a tall man with silver threading through his beard, wearing a crisp shirt and the kind of calm that made people listen before he even spoke. He was the CEO of AeroLink Systems, the company behind most of America's flight navigation software, and he was proud, though quietly so, of his only child. He looked at her desk, then at the faint shadows under her eyes. Still coding after midnight, Ava shrugged. "I had an idea. Didn't want to lose it." Malcolm smiled. "Your mama used to say that too, except her ideas were for songs, not software." Ava chuckled. "Yeah, but both changed the world in their own way." He crossed the room, set a hand on her shoulder. "You know, I could have sent someone from the office to escort you. Chicago can be," he hesitated, choosing the right word, "complicated. I'll be fine." "Dad," she said softly, "I need to do this alone." Malcolm studied her, the way only fathers do, seeing her strength, but also the fragility she tried so hard to hide. He sighed. "I know you will. I remember being your age, believing the world was ready for people like us. Turns out, sometimes the world needs reminding." Ava turned to face him. Her voice was calm, but her eyes carried a storm. "Then I'll remind them." They shared breakfast at the kitchen counter: toast, scrambled eggs, black coffee for him, orange juice for her. The TV in the corner mumbled morning news. FAA announces new guidelines addressing racial profiling in airport screenings. Malcolm muted it halfway through. "Still words," he said quietly. "No action." Ava looked at him. "Maybe that's why we're both here. You change systems. I change algorithms. He smiled, proud, spoken like a Carter. There was silence for a while, just the clinking of forks. Then Malcolm added, "Promise me one thing." "What's that?" "Whatever happens out there, keep your grace. The world's already waiting for you to lose it." Ava nodded slowly. "Grace before anger?" "Always." He kissed the top of her head. "That's my girl." 7:40 a.m., Hartsfield-Jackson Airport. The car dropped her at the curb. Her suitcase was small, carry-on only, black leather, initials A, C, engraved near the handle. The driver offered to help, but she waved him off. "I got it. Thanks." She stood there for a moment, breathing in the chaos of morning travel, the hum of engines, the chatter of announcements, the smell of coffee and jet fuel. People rushed past suits, headphones, families, exhaustion. She felt invisible, and sometimes that was a relief. In the security line, a woman in front of her turned, gave her a polite but puzzled glance. Ava smiled, and the woman smiled back, hesitant, like she was unsure whether to return the gesture. Ava had seen that look before, a look that asked, "Are you sure you belong here?" She'd spent her life answering it with excellence. At the North Star Air First Class counter, she handed over her phone for scanning. The agent, a man in his 40s with perfectly combed hair, raised his brows slightly. "First class?" he asked, as if confirming a rumor. "Yes, sir," she said, keeping her voice light. "Booked through AeroLink Corporate?" He blinked. "Oh, of course." He scanned it again, just to be sure. Ava noticed the hesitation, the microsecond pause that always meant doubt, and told herself to breathe. The machine beeped green. He smiled, overly polite now. "Enjoy your flight, Miss Carter." She walked toward the lounge, pulling her suitcase, chin lifted, the sound of her sneakers soft against the polished floor. Inside the first-class lounge, she found a quiet corner. Leather seats, glass walls, the faint sound of jazz. Everyone else seemed older, dressed in tailored suits, flipping through the Wall Street Journal or tapping on iPads. A man in his 50s glanced up from his coffee, stared for a moment too long, then looked away. Ava opened her laptop, continued refining her presentation slides. One line stood out on the screen. "Bias isn't just in data, it's in decisions." She whispered it again, under her breath. The words felt heavier here, surrounded by people who'd never had to prove their worth before taking a seat. A flight announcement interrupted the moment. North Star Flight 462 to Chicago. Boarding first-class passengers at Gate A3. She packed up, slipped on her backpack, and made her way to the gate. Laura Jenkins, the lead flight attendant, stood beside the boarding podium, her smile polite but mechanical. Her eyes landed on Ava, then flicked down to her sneakers, her backpack, her age. "Good morning," Ava greeted. "Morning," Laura replied, scanning her pass, her brow furrowed for half a second, just long enough to sting. Then she forced a smile. "Enjoy your flight." Ava nodded, walking past her. She could feel the weight of that look, the one that said, "How did you afford that seat?" without saying a word. Inside the aircraft, she found her seat 2A, window side. She slid in, exhaled, and pulled out her notebook. A man already seated across the aisle, a middle-aged consultant type, watched her for a beat, then leaned toward Laura as she passed. "Hey," he said quietly. "Are you sure she's in the right cabin?" Ava caught it. She always caught it. Her jaw tightened, but she kept her eyes on the window. Outside, the tarmac gleamed. Planes lined up for takeoff. The world was ready to move. Inside, Judgment had already boarded. Ava took out her phone, texted her dad, "Boarded. All good. Love you." He replied instantly, Proud of you already. Call me after you land." She smiled, locked the screen, and looked out the window again. The morning sun reflected off the glass, warm on her face. She closed her eyes for a moment, and in that small silence, she let herself hope. Hope that maybe, just maybe, this flight would be ordinary. She didn't know it yet, but nothing about the next 3 hours would be ordinary. Not for her, not for anyone on Flight 462. The intercom voice carried over the cabin speakers, soft and routine. "Good morning. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard North Star Flight 462 to Chicago. Flight time today is 2 hours and 15 minutes. Ava adjusted her seatbelt, slipped her earbuds in, and opened her laptop once more. The hum of conversation around her blended into white noise. The plane wasn't full, just 30 passengers in first class, most older, most white. Their voices rose and fell like waves, blending comfort and quiet superiority. Laura Jenkins moved down the aisle, offering polite smiles and greeting passengers with rehearsed warmth. When she reached Ava's row, her tone shifted. "Miss, would you like something to drink before takeoff?" "Yes. Water, please," Ava said, smiling. Laura hesitated. "Still or sparkling?" "Still's fine." Laura nodded, but her eyes lingered longer than they needed to. She turned away quickly, and Ava caught her whisper to the attendant behind her. "Make sure that seat's cleared for upgrade verification." "Row 2. Ava pretended not to notice, though her stomach tensed. She typed the next line on her slide deck. Bias doesn't always shout. Sometimes it whispers. Outside the window, ground crew waved wands, signaling motion. Engines rumbled awake. The air smelled faintly of jet fuel and recycled dreams. But as the cabin door closed, Laura reappeared beside Ava's seat. "Miss Carter, I just need to confirm your boarding pass again." Ava blinked, confused. "Why, oh, just routine verification. Happens sometimes with upgraded tickets." "I didn't upgrade," Ava replied, keeping her voice steady. "It's a first-class ticket booked through my father's corporate account." Laura gave a polite, almost patronizing smile. "I understand, but I'll need to see it again, just for records." Ava handed over her phone. Laura scanned it, frowned slightly, then handed it back. "Thank you," she said curtly, turning away. Ava's pulse slowed again. She told herself it was nothing. Maybe it really was routine. But in row 3, the man from earlier, gray suit, cufflinks gleaming, leaned toward Laura as she passed. "Thought so," he murmured. "Probably a mistake in seating. Doesn't look like she belongs here." Laura gave no response, but the corner of her mouth tightened. Ava caught it. The whisper. The look. The sting. She'd felt it too many times before when teachers doubted her grades, when recruiters second-guessed her resume, when cashiers triple-checked her card. Every time, it was the same melody of disbelief. Now, it was playing at 30,000 feet. As the plane taxied out, Ava glanced at her reflection in the window. Calm face, soft braids, simple hoodie, nothing threatening, nothing wrong. So why did her seat feel like a courtroom? Her internal voice whispered, "Stay calm. You've earned your place." She closed her laptop, letting the screen go black. 10 minutes later, the captain's voice came on again. "Folks, we've been cleared for departure. Please fasten your seatbelts. Flight attendants, prepare for takeoff." Laura moved down the aisle, checking seatbelts, pausing again by Ava's row. Her eyes narrowed slightly. "Miss Carter, please stow your laptop." "It's already off," Ava said. "Make sure it's secured," Laura insisted. Ava nodded, sliding it deeper into the seat pocket. When Laura left, Ava exhaled slowly. The woman's tone had changed colder now, clipped and official. She tried to shake it off, opening the small window shade to watch the world tilt into motion. Atlanta shrank below grids of homes, highways, lives fading into soft clouds. She thought of her dad, probably already in his office, sipping black coffee, reading quarterly reports. He'd checked the flight tracker at least twice, she knew. He always did. Grace before anger, she reminded herself. But grace was hard when it kept being tested. 30 minutes into the flight, the cabin settled. Coffee aromas filled the air. Passengers relaxed into silence. Ava pulled out her notebook, scribbling lines of thought for her presentation. AI isn't about machines learning to think like humans. It's about teaching humans to think without bias. She smiled faintly at the idea. Then came the shadow. Laura stood beside her again, arms folded. "Miss Carter, could I see your ticket once more?" Please, Ava froze. Again, yes. We're reviewing a possible discrepancy? What kind of discrepancy I'm not at liberty to say. The man across the aisle looked up, curious. The older woman behind Ava leaned forward slightly, pretending not to eavesdrop. Ava's voice stayed even, but her pulse climbed. "I've shown it twice already. I understand, but I need to confirm it matches the system record." Ava sighed, retrieved her phone, and handed it over. Laura scanned again, frowned again. That's odd. What's odd, I'll have to speak with my supervisor. Ava's jaw tightened. "Ma'am, is there a reason you keep checking my ticket?" Laura glanced around, lowering her voice. "It's just protocol." "Okay, don't make this more difficult than it has to be." The words hit like cold metal. Ava's eyes darkened. "I'm sitting quietly in my seat. You're the one making it difficult." Laura's lips pressed into a thin line. "Please remain calm." She turned away before Ava could answer. 2 rows back, Dr. Leah Thompson, the sociology professor returning from a lecture in Atlanta, had been watching the whole exchange. She'd seen that posture before, the guarded politeness masking unease. She took off her glasses and muttered, "Here we go again." 15 minutes later, the supervisor arrived, a man named Ray Donovan, wearing a navy vest and an expression that said he didn't want to be there. "Miss Carter," he said softly, "may I speak with you near the galley?" Ava looked up. "About what's your ticket information. It'll only take a moment." She hesitated. "I'd rather stay seated." "Everything is fine here." Ray forced a smile. "I understand, but we've had reports of an issue with your booking class. It's probably a computer error." Ava's chest tightened. She heard murmurs now. Passengers shifting, watching. Every cell in her body screamed, "Don't stand up." She shook her head. "If it's a computer error, fix it on the computer. I have nothing to explain." Ray sighed, glancing at Laura. "Ma'am, please don't make this harder." "I'm not making it harder. I'm just sitting in my seat." A murmur spread through the cabin. Someone whispered, "She's being difficult." Dr. Thompson unbuckled and stood. "Excuse me, but this young woman hasn't done anything wrong." Ray looked startled. "Ma'am, please stay seated." "No," the professor said firmly. "I've been watching since boarding. You've asked her for her ticket 3 times. That's not procedure, that's harassment." Laura shot her a warning glare. "Please don't interfere. Dr. Thompson crossed her arms. "Then stop giving me reasons to." Ava's heart raced, but she stayed silent. Her father's voice echoed in her memory. "Keep your grace." She did, even when her grace was mistaken for guilt. Ray reached for his radio, muttering, "I'll have airport security meet us at landing." Ava's head snapped up. "You're calling the police for what? Failure to comply with crew instructions." "I complied," she said, voice shaking but strong. "I showed you everything you asked for. You just didn't like what you saw." The cabin fell silent. The man in 2B looked away. Someone coughed, uneasy. "Doctor..." Thompson pulled out her phone, recording discreetly. Laura hissed, "Turn that off." The professor didn't. 15 more minutes passed in silence heavy enough to crush oxygen. Ava tried to breathe evenly, staring at the seat back in front of her, counting seconds. Her mind played loops. It's fine. It's almost over. Just land. But she knew it wasn't over. Ray returned with his radio pressed to his chest. "Airport police will meet us at the gate," he said quietly to Laura. Ava heard every word. Her pulse quickened. She looked around, saw eyes avoiding hers. No one spoke. No one asked if she was okay. Only Dr. Thompson leaned forward, whispering, "You're not alone." Ava swallowed hard, whispering back, "It sure feels like it." Outside, clouds rolled past like silent witnesses. Inside, tension sat in every seat. And then, the captain's voice. "Ladies and gentlemen, due to an administrative issue, we'll be landing in St. Louis for a brief stop before continuing to Chicago." Ava froze. She wasn't stupid. She knew this wasn't a random stop. Ray turned toward her seat, avoiding her gaze. Laura's tone was syrupy now. "We'll take care of everything once we're on the ground." Ava clenched her fists, nails digging into her palms. She whispered to herself, "Grace before anger. Grace before anger." Dr. Thompson leaned close. "They're pulling you off this flight, aren't they?" Ava nodded faintly. "Yes. Then let's make sure the world sees it." She held her phone higher, steady. Ava straightened in her seat, eyes fixed ahead. Her voice trembled, not with fear but exhaustion. "I'm tired of explaining why I belong." The engines began to descend. The cabin lights dimmed. Through the window, St. Louis sprawled beneath the clouds, unaware that its tarmac was about to host something that would ignite the entire country. Ava's phone buzzed with a message from her father, unaware of what was happening in the air. "Call me when you land. Proud of you. Always." She stared at the screen. For a second, she wanted to reply, "Don't be proud yet. Not until I survive this flight." But she didn't type anything. She locked the phone, tucked it away, and took a breath so deep it hurt. Somewhere deep down, she felt it the moment before injustice becomes history. And she was right. Because when the wheels touched the ground, a uniformed officer was already waiting outside the cabin door. The landing gear groaned as Flight 462 touched down in St. Louis. The sound jolted everyone awake, but the air inside the cabin was already thick with unease. Passengers looked around, whispering questions that no one answered. Ava sat upright, her hands folded on her lap, eyes fixed on the seat back ahead of her. Every heartbeat sounded like an engine thrum in her ears. She counted each breath, slow and even, the way her father had taught her when she used to panic before school debates. Grace before anger, she reminded herself again and again. The seatbelt sign chimed off, and Laura's voice came through the intercom, almost too bright. "Ladies and gentlemen, please remain seated while we address a brief procedural matter. We'll be continuing to Chicago shortly." Her tone was calm, but the stiffness around her mouth betrayed something else. The cabin door hissed open. A tall man in a Navy security uniform stepped in. His badge caught the overhead light. Airport Police. Officer Greg Matthews. His voice carried the authority of habit, not aggression, but there was a practiced distance in it, as though he had already decided who was right. Ray Donovan appeared behind him, sweat glistening at his temple. "She's in seat 2A," he whispered. Greg nodded once and began walking down the aisle. The plane was silent except for the squeak of his boots on the carpet. Ava could feel every pair of eyes following him until he stopped beside her row. "Miss Carter." "Yes," she said, forcing her voice steady. "I'm going to ask you to come with me. Please." "Why?" "We've had a report of a ticketing discrepancy," he said. "It'll only take a few minutes to sort out." Ava didn't move. "You've been told that already isn't true," Dr. Thompson interjected from across the aisle. "This girl has done nothing wrong. You can check the manifest yourself." Greg turned slightly toward the professor. "Ma'am, I'll need you to stay seated." His tone sharpened, not unkind, but final. Then he faced Ava again. "Miss, I'm asking politely. Let's handle this outside the aircraft." "Am I being detained?" Ava asked quietly. "No, ma'am, but refusing to follow crew instructions could become a security issue." Ava took a breath. Her palms were damp. She could smell the recycled air, hear a baby crying in the back, feel 30 strangers watching to see what she would do next. "My ticket is valid. I've complied with every request. Why are you still questioning me?" Greg hesitated, thrown off by her composure. He wasn't used to calm defiance. "Look, I'm not here to argue," he said. "Let's just talk outside. It's standard procedure, standard for who Ava asked." The question landed like a spark in dry grass. The man in 2B muttered, "Just go, kid. Don't make a scene." Ava turned her head slowly toward him. "A scene's already been made," she said. Her voice was quiet, but it carried through the cabin. "I just didn't write it." Greg shifted, uneasy. "Miss Carter, please stand." She stayed seated. "Dr. Thompson raised her phone higher, recording openly now. "Officer, if you put your hands on that girl, you're going to be on the evening news." The words hung heavy. Laura looked panicked. "Doctor, please stop filming," she pleaded. "This isn't helping. It's documenting," the professor replied. "Those are different things." The atmosphere crackled. Ava's pulse roared in her ears, but she still didn't move. Greg's hand dropped to rest near his belt, not aggressive, just instinct, but the gesture sent a chill through the cabin. Someone gasped softly. Ava's throat tightened. She thought of her father's voice that morning, warm and steady, saying, "The world sometimes needs reminding." Maybe this was that moment. She reached into her pocket, pulled out her phone, and pressed the side button to start recording. "I'd like to speak to your supervisor," she said. "I am the supervisor on duty," Greg answered. "Then I'd like to speak to your conscience." The line caught even her by surprise. Silence fell. Greg's jaw flexed. "Ma'am, I need you to come with me." Ava looked up at him fully now, unflinching. "No." The word wasn't loud, but it changed the air. Every sound, the hum of engines, the cough from row 5, the shuffle of Ray's shoes stopped for that single syllable. Greg blinked. "Miss Carter, don't make this harder." "You already did," Dr. Thompson said softly. "Good for you, sweetheart." Greg sighed and touched his radio. "Dispatch. Passenger refusing to deplane." "Copy," came a crackled response. Laura whispered something to Ray, who shook his head helplessly. "Sir," Ava said before he could speak again, "my father's company partners with this airline. His name is Malcolm Carter, CEO of AeroLink Systems. You can confirm that, but that isn't why you should stop. You should stop because this is wrong." Greg paused, skeptical. "Ma'am, everyone says they know somebody. Then call whoever you need to call," Ava replied. "But I'm not moving because you're uncomfortable with who's sitting here." Dr. Thompson lowered her phone slightly, tears edging her voice. "Child, you remind me of myself 40 years ago." The officer hesitated, torn between procedure and doubt. Ray leaned in. "Officer, maybe we should verify with the gate before escalating." Greg exhaled sharply. "Fine. Stay put." He stepped toward the galley, radio pressed to his ear, muttering into the receiver. Laura bent down beside Ava, voice trembling. "Look, I don't want trouble. I was just following instructions." "No," Ava said. "You were following assumptions." Laura straightened quickly, color rising in her cheeks. She turned away, muttering, "You people always have to make it about race." Ava closed her eyes. The words struck harder than she expected. She had heard them 100 times in 100 versions, but hearing them here, on a plane, her father's software kept in the sky, felt like betrayal. The professor reached across the aisle, touched her hand gently. "You're not crazy. It's happening." Ava nodded, tears threatening but not falling. "I know," she whispered. The intercom crackled again. The captain's voice, measured, cautious. "Ladies and gentlemen, please remain seated. We're resolving a minor passenger issue. We'll be on our way shortly." Minor? The word felt bitter. Greg returned after several minutes, his face unreadable. "Miss Carter," he said. "Quieter now. I've spoken with the gate. They're contacting the airline's corporate office." "Good," Ava said simply. "Then I'll wait." He hesitated again. "Until then, I'm going to have to ask for your phone." "No," Ava answered. "You don't have that authority. And this is evidence, Dr. Thompson added, and mine's streaming live." Greg looked around, realizing half the cabin now held up phones. The dynamic had shifted. The power wasn't his anymore. He stepped back, rubbing the bridge of his nose. "This is getting out of hand." He murmured, "No." Ava said, "It's finally being seen." Outside the window, 2 airport vehicles pulled up beside the plane. Ava caught the reflection of flashing lights across the fuselage. She whispered to herself, "Dad, if you're watching the tracker, please call." She didn't know if he was, but the thought steadied her. Another officer appeared at the door, gesturing. Greg turned to him, whispered something, then came back. "Miss Carter, your father has been contacted by airline management," he said slowly. "They're verifying everything now." Relief flickered in Ava's chest, but she stayed composed. "So we wait," she said. "Yes, ma'am." He nodded, stepping aside. The cabin exhaled collectively, the tension loosening just slightly. Laura disappeared toward the galley. Ray followed, both whispering furiously. "Doctor," Thompson leaned closer. "You handled that with grace, child?" "Trying to," Ava said, voice barely audible. "You did more than try." The hum of conversation resumed slowly, a mixture of curiosity and guilt. Some passengers avoided Ava's gaze, others offered small, apologetic smiles. She didn't return them. She was tired of being someone's learning moment. 10 minutes passed. Her phone vibrated. Unknown number. She answered quietly. "Hello." The voice on the line was firm, controlled, familiar. "Ava, it's Dad." Her throat tightened. "They called you." "Yes." "Stay calm. Don't say another word to anyone until I speak with the captain." "Dad." "They were about to pull me off." "They won't," Malcolm said. "Not anymore." The tone in his voice steady, unshakable, made her chest ease for the first time since takeoff. He continued, "Put me on speaker." She did. Greg approached, uncertain. "Sir, who am I speaking with?" Malcolm's voice filled the cabin, rich and resonant through the tiny speaker. This is Malcolm Carter, CEO of AeroLink Systems, the company that provides your airline's flight control software, and the father of the young woman you've been harassing for the last hour." A ripple of whispers ran through the rows. Greg froze. Ray stopped mid-step. Even Laura turned, eyes wide. Malcolm's tone didn't rise, but every word landed like a gavel. "Officer Matthews, please confirm whether my daughter has violated any law." "No, sir," Greg managed. "Then you will keep her seated and unharmed until I speak with North Star's executive operations." "Yes, sir." "And, officer, leave your body camera running. I expect full transparency." "Understood." Ava stared at her phone, half in awe, half in heartbreak. She had needed her father to step in, and that, too, was part of the tragedy. Malcolm's voice softened. "Ava, are you okay?" "I'm fine," she said. Though her voice trembled, "I just wanted them to see me as a person." "They will," he said, "because now the world's watching." He hung up to make other calls. Greg lowered his radio. The captain appeared, confusion and apology etched on his face. "Miss Carter," he said gently, "we've been instructed to deplane all passengers. The flight is canceled pending investigation." Gasps erupted. The man in 2B swore under his breath. "Are you kidding me?" Laura stared, stunned. "Canceled." The captain nodded. "Corporate orders." Ava leaned back, exhaustion flooding her limbs. She hadn't won. Not really, but something had shifted. The power had moved. And power, once exposed, couldn't hide again. "Doctor." Thompson turned off her recording, tears shining in her eyes. "Child," she whispered, "you just changed the story." Outside, rain began to fall against the window, thin streaks blurring the flashing lights on the tarmac. Inside, silence settled again. Not of fear this time, but reckoning. Ava looked down at her trembling hands and whispered to herself. Grace before anger. For the first time, she realized grace could roar. The rain outside thickened, streaking the cabin windows like veins of silver. The sound filled the silence that had swallowed Flight 462. Passengers sat still, uncertain whether to feel relieved or inconvenienced. Some whispered about missed connections. Others simply stared at their phones, pretending not to have witnessed the last half hour of quiet chaos. Ava stayed motionless. The reflection in the glass showed a girl who looked composed but felt hollow. Her fingers trembled against her jeans. She watched her breath fog faintly on the cold window and thought, "This is what it feels like when justice has to call from a distance." Greg stood near the cockpit door, radio pressed to his ear. Every few seconds he nodded, murmured clipped responses. Laura leaned against the galley wall, eyes red-rimmed, whispering to Ray. None of them approached Ava again. When the intercom buzzed, the captain's voice came through, carefully measured. "Ladies and gentlemen, corporate headquarters has instructed us to deplane. Please remain seated until you receive further directions." The murmurs grew. Ava closed her eyes. Somewhere out there, her father was pulling invisible levers that could stop this entire flight, and yet she wished he didn't have to. She wanted the world to fix itself without him. The aisle lights glowed. Greg turned toward her. "Miss Carter, your father is on the line again. He'd like to speak to the captain directly." His tone had changed. It carried something like respect now. The captain emerged, tall, middle-aged, his uniform crisp. He took the phone, listened for a moment, nodded once. Then he handed it to Greg, who handed it to Ava. "He wants to talk to you first." Ava pressed the phone to her ear. "Dad, I'm here," Malcolm said. The calm in his voice wrapped around her like a blanket. "They're grounding the flight, sweetheart." You're safe, but I need you to breathe for me. I'm fine, she whispered. No, you're not, he said softly, but you will be. Tell me everything, quickly. She described what had happened, every repeated check, every stare, every word. He listened without interrupting. The only sound on the line, his slow, deliberate breathing. Okay, he said finally. I'm going to fix this. Stay on the plane until I tell you otherwise. Dad, please don't, Ava. He cut in gently. You did nothing wrong. The people who need to learn that will learn it today. She swallowed hard. I just wanted to make it to Chicago. You still will, he said. But first, they're going to remember your name. He hung up before she could answer. Across the cabin, Dr. Thompson gave her a questioning look. Ava managed a tiny nod. He's handling it, she whispered. The professor smiled sadly. Seems like he always is. Minutes stretched. The smell of rain seeped faintly through the open cabin door. Outside, airport staff in yellow ponchos moved hurriedly, unaware that inside, a moment of quiet revolution was forming. Greg received another call. He listened, expression tightening, then exhaled and turned to the captain. Orders from above. Cancel the flight. All crew report for review. Laura's mouth fell open. Review. What about us? That's all I was told. Greg replied. His radio crackled again, and the passenger stays seated until Mr. Carter's representative arrives. The announcement rippled through the cabin. People began gathering their things, muttering complaints. The man from 2B shook his head. Unbelievable. One girl delays 100 people. Dr. Thompson fixed him with a look so sharp he looked away. Ava said nothing. She just watched them pass, one after another, filing toward the exit, their irritation louder than their guilt. When the aisle cleared, she sat alone in the front section with Dr. Thompson beside her. The professor sighed. Power changes the tone of everything, doesn't it? It shouldn't have to, Ava said. But sometimes it's the only language they hear. Outside, flashing amber lights reflected on the wet tarmac. A black sedan pulled up beside the portable staircase. Two men in dark suits stepped out, umbrellas opening like wings. They spoke briefly with Greg, who nodded and motioned them aboard. The first man introduced himself. Ms. Carter, I'm Adrian Lane, legal counsel for AeroLink Systems. Your father asked me to ensure your safety. His voice was professional but warm. You can relax now? Relax, Ava repeated softly. I can't remember what that feels like. Dr. Thompson stood. I'll stay until you leave, she said. Adrian smiled gratefully. That would be appreciated. Laura and Ray approached hesitantly. Ms. Carter, Laura began, voice trembling. We never meant to what Ava asked gently. To make me remember I don't belong. Laura's eyes filled with tears. I was following procedure. Then change the procedure, Ava said, because it keeps breaking people. Laura lowered her gaze. I'm sorry. Ava wanted to believe her, but she couldn't yet. Forgiveness needed truth before it could breathe. Greg cleared his throat. Ms. Carter, we'll escort you to the terminal. Your father's on a secure video line waiting there. Ava nodded. She gathered her backpack, the same one that had seemed suspicious an hour ago, and followed them down the narrow stairs into the rain. The wind was cool against her face. Each drop felt like release inside the terminal. A small conference room had been prepared. Screens flickered to life as they entered. Malcolm's face appeared on the central monitor, framed by city lights from his office. He looked tired but composed. The way a man looks when anger has cooled into precision. Ava, he said, You did everything right. I'm okay, she replied. That's not enough, he said quietly. You deserve better than okay. He turned his attention to the group behind her. Officer Matthews, Captain Harris, Ms. Jenkins, Mr. Donovan. Thank you for being present. You'll remain here until the corporate inquiry begins. North Star's board is aware of the incident. Effective immediately. This flight is suspended. The passengers will be rebooked, and the recording of today's events will be preserved as evidence. Laura tried to speak. Sir, not now. Malcolm interrupted, his voice steady but firm. I've spent 20 years building systems to keep people safe at 30,000 feet. I didn't build them for prejudice to thrive at the same altitude. Ava watched her father command the room from hundreds of miles away. The contrast between his controlled authority and her quiet endurance hit her suddenly. The tears she'd been holding finally slipped down her cheeks. Malcolm saw and softened. Sweetheart, he said gently, go with Adrian. He'll take you to the car. I'll meet you tonight. Dad, she whispered, what happens to them? They'll answer for their choices, he said. But that's not your burden to carry. Dr. Thompson stepped forward. Mr. Carter, with respect, this shouldn't end in punishment alone. It should end in education. Malcolm nodded slowly. You're right, Doctor, and maybe you can help us build that. She smiled faintly. I'd be honored. Ava rose, slinging her backpack over one shoulder. As she turned to leave, Laura called softly, Ava, I truly am sorry. Ava paused. I know, she said, but I need to be more than a lesson. She walked out without looking back. The corridor outside was quiet except for the hum of lights. Adrian walked beside her. Your father's already trending online, he said. The story's spreading fast. Of course it is, she murmured. People love outrage more than understanding. He glanced at her. Maybe this time they'll find both. They reached the exit doors. The sedan waited, engine idling, headlights cutting through the drizzle. Before climbing in, Ava looked up at the gray Missouri sky. She thought about her presentation slides still saved on her laptop, the words she had written before boarding detecting bias before it becomes harm. She whispered them again, tasting the irony. The system had failed to detect its own. As the car pulled away, she leaned her head against the window. The city lights blurred through raindrops. She felt exhaustion settle over her shoulders, heavier than fear, lighter than anger. Somewhere behind her, in a terminal room full of uneasy silence, grown adults were realizing what it felt like to be seen for the first time in the mirror of their own prejudice. She closed her eyes and let the hum of the road lull her. Her father's voice echoed softly in memory. They will see you, Ava. The question is, what will they see next? She didn't know yet, but she knew the story wasn't over. Tomorrow she would wake up, and the world would be watching. Maybe that was the beginning of change, or just another reminder that justice still had miles to travel before it could rest. Morning came like a slow confession. The gray light spread across the Carter estate in Atlanta, spilling through wide windows that overlooked the city skyline. Ava sat at the kitchen counter wrapped in a blanket, her untouched coffee cooling beside her. Her phone buzzed every few seconds messages, missed calls, news alerts, interview requests, hashtags. She had become a headline overnight. The video recorded by Dr. Thompson had gone viral before dawn, millions of views, thousands of comments, some angry, some inspired, some cruel. She scrolled through a few and stopped when she saw one that read, Grace under fire. The world needs more Avas. She smiled faintly, but her chest felt heavy. Malcolm entered quietly, still in his black suit from the night before. His eyes were tired, but his expression was composed. "You didn't sleep?" he said. "Neither did you," she replied softly. He poured himself coffee, then leaned against the counter across from her. "It's everywhere," he said. "CNN, the Post, even the BBC called. They're calling it the Flight 462 incident." Ava winced at the phrasing. An incident, like a weather delay. "The world simplifies things it doesn't understand," Malcolm said. "But that doesn't mean we have to." He placed a small envelope on the counter. "From AeroLink's board, a formal apology to you. They're launching an internal investigation, and I've ordered new protocols for anti-bias training across all partner airlines." Ava looked at him. "You did that in one night. Injustice doesn't get to rest," he said simply. "Neither do I." She picked up the envelope, running her thumb along the embossed company logo. "It feels strange," she said. "People are calling me brave, but I didn't do anything except sit still. Sometimes sitting still is the loudest thing you can do." Malcolm replied. "It forces the world to move around you." Her phone buzzed again. Dr. Thompson's name appeared on the screen. Ava answered quickly. "Morning, Doctor. Morning, dear," came the warm voice. "You holding up trying?" "Good. Because the world's holding on to your story. I've had 3 universities ask if you'd speak about what happened." Ava blinked. "Speak about what about dignity, child?" the professor said. "About how you carried it when everyone else dropped theirs?" Ava hesitated. "I don't know if I'm ready for that." "Ready or not," Dr. Thompson said gently, "history has a way of calling people who didn't ask to be called, but you answer anyway." After the call ended, Malcolm set his coffee down. "You should consider it," he said. "You have a voice that people listen to now." "I never wanted that kind of voice," Ava murmured. "I just wanted to present my project. And now you will," he said, "except the stage will be bigger." That afternoon, the front gate cameras flashed with reporters' vans and satellite trucks. Headlines rolled across screens. Teen CEO's daughter harassed on flight, corporate fallout grows. Grace before anger. Trends nationwide. AeroLink CEO promises reform. Malcolm's assistant Adrian arrived with printed statements. "Press conference at 3 p.m., he said. "They want both of you to speak." Ava looked at him, alarmed. "Me? Yes. They want to hear your side." She turned to her father. "I don't want to be some symbol." "Dad, you're not a symbol," he said softly. "You're a mirror. Let them see what they've become." She exhaled shakily. "And if they see nothing, then that's their reflection," he said. At 3 p.m., they stood together in the AeroLink atrium, a sleek glass space filled with reporters and bright lights. Cameras flashed, microphones extended like reaching hands. Malcolm began first, his voice steady and resonant. "Yesterday, my daughter Ava was subjected to a pattern of behavior that too many black travelers know too well. It was not a misunderstanding. It was a symptom." He paused, letting the room breathe. "Our company will not tolerate discrimination in any form, not in code, not in policy, not in culture." Then he gestured for Ava. The crowd hushed. She stepped forward, heart pounding. The microphones looked like eyes. "I didn't want to be here," she began, voice low but clear. "I was just trying to get to a conference to present my research about detecting bias in systems." I guess the irony wrote itself. A ripple of laughter, soft, nervous. She continued. "I've learned that technology isn't the only place bias hides. It lives in people, in habits, in what we call normal. And maybe if we start naming it, we can start changing it." The room fell silent. She glanced at her father, who gave a small nod. My dad taught me something, she said. Grace before anger. I held on to that, but grace doesn't mean silence. Grace can stand. It can speak. It can fight kindly, but firmly. Cameras clicked. Reporters scribbled. One asked, Ava, what do you hope comes from this? She thought for a moment. I hope the next time a young black girl sits in first class, no one wonders if she belongs there. I hope she just flies. The applause began small, then swelled. For a brief moment, Ava felt something lift off her shoulders, not relief, but purpose. That night, she and Malcolm watched the coverage together from the living room. Clips of her speech played between commentary panels. News anchors debated corporate responsibility and racial bias. Social media filled with support and outrage in equal measure. Hashtags multiplied, memes appeared, opinions clashed, and through it all, Ava sat quietly, her expression unreadable. Malcolm studied her. What are you thinking? He asked. That stories move faster than healing, she said. By tomorrow, half these people will have moved on. Maybe, he said, but some won't. Some will change something because of you. She looked at him. Do you really think one flight can change anything? No, he said, but one truth can. 2 days later, AeroLink announced a new initiative, Project Horizon, a nationwide training program, scholarship fund, and AI-based bias detection system built from Ava's research to be implemented across the airline industry. Her prototype, once a small high school project, now had government interest. The Department of Transportation called. So did universities. So did journalists. She declined most interviews, but she agreed to one a sit-down conversation with a journalist from The Atlantic. The interview took place in a quiet library near her school. The journalist, a woman with kind eyes, asked, Ava, when you look back, what's the first thing you feel? Ava smiled faintly, tired, but grateful. Grateful for what that had happened to me and not someone who would have been broken by it. The journalist nodded slowly. Do you forgive them? Ava thought a long time. Not yet, she said finally, but I'm working on forgiving the world for still needing proof. When the article published, it went viral again, not for its outrage, but for its honesty. People quoted her words, grace doesn't mean silence. Schools used it in ethics discussions. Activists cited it in panels. Weeks passed. The noise began to fade. The story became a symbol, then a memory, then a lesson whispered in boardrooms. Ava returned to school, tried to reclaim normal life, but something inside her had changed. She could no longer walk into a room without noticing the subtle pauses, the glances, the unspoken calculations people made. She saw it everywhere now, not just in airports, but in offices, classrooms, stores. Her eyes had been tuned to injustice like a frequency she could no longer turn off. One evening, she sat outside under the oak tree behind their house, laptop on her knees. She was rewriting her program, integrating human behavior data into her AI model. The idea came to her like a spark to create a system that could analyze live customer interactions for micro-bias indicators, tone, language, timing, and provide real-time feedback for training. A machine to remind humans to be more human. She named it Grace, after her father's words. Malcolm found her there, deep in code. Still working, he asked. Always, she said, smiling faintly. You know, the government's interested in your model, he said. They want to test it for public service training. She looked up at him, eyes gleaming in the fading light. Then maybe this wasn't just a flight. Dad, maybe it was the takeoff. He laughed quietly. You sound like your mother. That's a compliment, she said. They stood together as the evening settled around them. The cicadas hummed. The city lights blinked in the distance. For the first time in weeks, Ava felt peace. The storm outside had become something else, a movement, slow but sure. Later that night, as she lay in bed, her phone buzzed with one final message from an unknown number. "Thank you for standing your ground. I was on that flight too. I didn't say anything, but I will next time." She read it twice, then smiled through quiet tears. Maybe that was what change looked like, not a revolution, but a whisper turned into an echo. She turned off the phone, closed her eyes, and breathed deeply. Tomorrow would come, full of work, questions, headlines, hope, but for tonight, she just let herself rest. She had flown through fear and landed in something stronger, and somewhere in the quiet, her father's voice echoed in memory one last time. Not a command, not advice, just truth. Grace before anger. Always. But never mistake grace for surrender. Spring returned to Atlanta with soft sunlight and streets lined with cherry blossoms. The world had moved on from the frenzy of Flight 462, but Ava Carter's name still lingered in conversations about change. Months had passed, yet the echoes of that day continued shaping laws, headlines, and hearts. The program she had built, Grace, had left her laptop and entered the real world. It now lived inside servers, training centers, and classrooms. Airlines adopted it, corporations licensed it, universities studied it. The code that began as her quiet rebellion had grown into something far larger, a language teaching machines and people alike how to recognize the weight of bias before it fell. Inside AeroLink headquarters, the glass atrium buzzed with movement. Banners read, "Dignity in Action Conference presented by the Grace Foundation." Reporters, tech leaders, and community advocates filled the hall. Cameras flashed, laughter echoed, and somewhere in the center of it all stood Ava, no longer the quiet girl from the flight, but a poised young woman, confident yet still grounded in humility. She wore a simple navy dress, her hair braided neatly, her expression calm. Malcolm stood beside her, pride hidden behind his usual composure. "You ready?" he asked. "As ready as I can be," she said, exhaling. "You've been ready since the day you said no on that plane," he replied. She smiled faintly. "I wasn't ready then. I was just tired of pretending I wasn't seen." He looked at her, eyes soft. Sometimes that's where change begins. Dr. Leah Thompson joined them, elegant in a pale gray suit, a familiar spark of wisdom in her gaze. "They're all waiting for you," she said. "And for the record, your speech draft made me cry twice." Ava laughed gently. "You cry easily, Doctor, only when it matters," the professor replied. The lights dimmed as the host announced, "Please welcome Miss Ava Carter, founder of the Grace Foundation." Applause swelled. Ava stepped to the podium. For a moment, she just looked at the crowd faces of every color, every background. Then she spoke. "A year ago, I boarded a plane hoping to share an idea about detecting bias in technology. I never imagined that I'd become the example my code was trying to prevent. What happened to me could have stayed just another painful story, but my father reminded me that grace can be louder than anger, so I turned pain into purpose." She paused as the audience leaned closer. The grace system isn't about blaming people. It's about reminding us that fairness isn't automatic. It's a choice, made over and over again. It measures tone, timing, and empathy. It holds up a mirror, not a verdict. And every day, it learns from the best part of us, not the worst. The crowd listened in silence, some wiping their eyes. Ava continued, voice steady. "This foundation isn't about me. It's about what happens when we choose to see each other fully. The goal isn't to make headlines, it's to make habits. Because equality isn't an event, it's a discipline. Applause rose, long and heartfelt. Cameras captured her smile, genuine and warm. Malcolm watched from the side, feeling something rare, a sense that the next generation didn't just inherit the world, they were rewriting it. After the speech, reporters surrounded her. One asked, "Ava, what's next for you?" She thought for a moment before answering, "To keep building. Grace is expanding into hospitals and schools next. Because bias doesn't stop at airports. It's in every place decisions are made." Another journalist asked, "Do you ever think about the people from that flight?" Ava nodded slowly. "Sometimes. I hope they've learned something too. Maybe that's enough." Later, in a quieter moment, Laura Jenkins approached her. The former flight attendant looked smaller somehow, her once confident posture replaced by humility. "Ava," she began, voice soft. "I wasn't sure if I should come, but I wanted to see you in person." Ava smiled gently. "I'm glad you did." Laura hesitated, then said, "I finished the cultural empathy training your company sponsored. I volunteer with passenger advocacy now. I just wanted you to know that I'm trying." Ava studied her for a moment, then nodded. "That means something. Laura, change doesn't start perfect. It just starts." Tears filled the woman's eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. When Laura left, Dr. Thompson appeared beside Ava again. That was kindness without surrender. She said. Ava smiled. "Grace before anger." She replied, "Always," the professor said. That evening, after the event ended, Ava and her father drove home through quiet streets lined with blooming trees. The city glowed gold under the streetlights. "You know," Malcolm said, "your mother would have been proud." Ava looked out the window, smiling softly. "She would have told me to rest." "She would have told you to celebrate," he corrected. "Rest later." They both laughed quietly, back at home. Ava stepped onto the porch, looking up at the stars. The night was clear, the air cool. She could hear the faint hum of cars on the distant highway like the heartbeat of a world still moving, still learning. She thought about the people she'd met, the messages she'd received, the changes still to come. The journey wasn't over, but the fear was gone. Inside. Her laptop pinged with a new email, Department of Education proposal approved GRACE program pilot for national high schools. She stared at the screen, heart full. Then she whispered, "Here we go again." Malcolm joined her at the doorway. "Good news. The best kind," she said. "They're bringing grace to schools." He smiled. "Then you've given the next generation a better flight path." She laughed softly. "I just gave them a better compass." As the night deepened, Ava sat at her desk, typing new lines of code. Each keystroke felt lighter now, each word closer to healing. The program pulsed softly on the screen, a constellation of logic and empathy working together. She thought back to that morning in Atlanta before the flight, when she had written the phrase, "Detecting bias before it becomes harm." Now, it meant something entirely different. It wasn't just about systems or software anymore. It was about people, how they looked at one another, how they listened, how they learned. When the clock struck midnight, she closed her laptop and stepped outside one last time. The air smelled of rain and possibility. Somewhere far above, another plane passed, its lights blinking across the stars. For a moment, she imagined a young black girl sitting in first class on that flight, headphones on, dreams wide open, and no one questioning if she belonged. Ava smiled and whispered into the night, "Fly safe, whoever you are. You belong everywhere. Inside. Her father's voice floated from the living room. Come on. Ava, you've got an early day tomorrow. She turned back, calling softly. Just a minute. Dad. She looked once more at the sky and let the silence fill her, not empty, but whole. Grace had carried her through anger, through fear, through judgment, and brought her here to peace. She walked inside, closing the door gently behind her. The world outside kept turning, stories kept being written. But for now, this one had landed exactly where it needed to. The story of Ava Carter isn't just about a girl on a plane. It's about what happens when quiet dignity meets loud injustice and refuses to break. For older audiences who have seen generations of struggle and change, her story reminds us that progress doesn't always shout. Sometimes, it speaks softly through grace. Ava teaches that courage isn't the absence of fear, but the decision to stay composed in its face. Her father shows that power can serve justice, not ego. Together, they remind us that respect must be practiced daily in our words, our choices, our assumptions. The lesson is simple, yet profound. Every encounter is a chance to humanize the world a little more. Whether we lead a company, a classroom, or a family, we all have the same responsibility to see others with empathy before judgment. In a divided time, Ava's calm strength becomes a mirror for all of us. It asks not how loud we can protest, but how steadfastly we can stand for what's right, even when the world questions our seat. Thank you for joining us on this powerful journey through Ava Carter's story, a story of grace, courage, and the fight to be seen. Your time, your attention, and your empathy mean more than you know. If this story moved you, inspired you, or made you think a little deeper about justice and respect, please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe. Every click helps spread these stories of humanity and hope to more hearts around the world. Stay tuned because more voices like Ava's are waiting to be heard.